It started with a Nikon D3200. Dust-covered and half-consumed by damp moss, the DSLR was discovered by a forestry student during a routine trail survey near Crescent Falls National Forest in Oregon. The area had been closed off for wildfire mitigation the year before and only recently reopened. When the student pried the cracked case from beneath the wet leaves, it was clear the camera hadn't been lost by accident. The lens was fractured. The memory card, however, was still inside. The footage, later recovered by police technicians, showed 6 people, 3 men and 3 women, setting up camera rigs, laughing into lavalier mics, joking about another cursed location shoot. Their banner, briefly visible in the background, read, "Frightland Season 2. That web series had gone offline 3 years earlier after abruptly ceasing uploads. The final episode had ended with a vague message. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the remainder of the season has been postponed. No one involved was ever heard from again. When the footage was authenticated in June 2025, it led the Oregon State Police to reopen a case that had quietly been filed away. 6 missing persons, all crew members of an independent horror documentary. The project had intended to film reenactments of unsolved crimes in forested regions across the Pacific Northwest. Their second location was an abandoned ranger cabin deep in Crescent Falls, an area known for erratic cell reception, landslides, and long-forgotten trails that didn't appear on modern GPS systems. The 6 missing included Erin Weiler, 27, the director, based in Portland; Luis Arboleda, 31, the cinematographer, originally from New Jersey; Taylor Marks, 24, assistant editor and sound mixer; Jacob Vance, 28, on-screen host, former journalism major; Melissa Tan, 26, makeup and props; Jonah Strick, 30, logistics and driver. They had checked into a roadside lodge on April 7, 2022. Receipts confirmed they purchased fuel, firewood, and non-perishable groceries that evening. Surveillance footage from a local gas station time-stamped them leaving in a white Dodge Ram van the following morning, April 8th, heading east along Route 14. It was the last confirmed sighting. Initial investigation efforts were minimal. The production was considered guerrilla style, meaning permits were not officially filed for national forest access. It wasn't until April 15th, when the lodge manager reported their gear left behind in 2 rooms, that local authorities realized no member of the crew had returned. By that point, their families had already been trying to reach them, dozens of unanswered texts, voicemails left without reply. Instagram stories abruptly stopped on April 8th, the last post being a slow zoom of fog curling over tree canopies, captioned, "This place is unreal." A shallow search was conducted in the western quadrant of Crescent Falls, but inconsistent maps, spring flooding, and lack of resources stalled efforts. Only one object had been recovered in 2022, a fragment of camera tripod discovered halfway down a ravine. At the time, it was not considered significant. With the resurfacing of the DSLR in 2025, attention refocused. The footage was short, less than 4 minutes, but showed the crew arriving at a clearing near what appeared to be a collapsed structure. There was audio of wind, indistinct chatter, and then a phrase captured clearly by Erin Weiler. "We should mark the path. This is deeper than we thought." Moments later, the camera jostled and the recording ended. Using the few identifiable landmarks in the recovered footage, forensic teams cross-referenced archival maps and logging records. On June 19th, a team of rangers and search dogs located the remains of the ranger cabin, buried beneath growth and decades of erosion, nearly half a mile from the suspected trailhead. Inside what was left of the foundation, they found a collapsed backpack filled with mold-ridden clothes, an audio recorder, batteries corroded, and a clump of synthetic hair extensions. later matched to Melissa Tan's style during filming, as seen in the lost footage. Forensics combed the area, but decomposition, wildlife, and seasonal floods had erased most traces of human presence. No skeletal remains were recovered. However, an object buried inside a rusted fire-safe box offered a chilling breadcrumb. It was a half-burned script. Pages from an episode outline describing the fictional reenactment of a 1993 disappearance of 2 hikers from the same forest. The typed notes described scenes of fear, isolation, and a disoriented descent into madness experienced by the characters. But someone had annotated the pages in red ink, handwritten, "This isn't fiction anymore. Get out while you can." There were no fingerprints on the ink, no indication of when the note had been written, but the presence of the script, the memory card, and the audio gear suggested the crew had not left voluntarily. By the time the first rain of early July swept through Crescent Falls, the camera, script, and gear had been sealed and transported to the Oregon State Crime Lab. Analysts began reconstructing a timeline, piecing together files from phone GPS pings, unused footage from cloud backups, and metadata hidden inside cached email drafts. Back in Portland, families gathered again for interviews with investigators. All of them shared one thing: that over the course of 2022, the members of the Frightland crew had become increasingly obsessed with authenticity, pushing deeper into remote sites, chasing real fear for the sake of better stories. And for a while, it had worked, until they vanished. 3 years earlier, on April 5, 2022, Erin Weiler had emailed the Frightland crew a revised shooting schedule. Attached was a satellite image of the Crescent Falls Basin, along with hand-drawn annotations marking a derelict ranger station last mentioned in federal fire records from 1989. Erin's subject line was straightforward: undocumented, unfilmed, untouched. The email had been preserved in a cloud cache recovered from Taylor Mark's personal tablet. Investigators working with digital forensics from the Oregon State Police began reconstructing a full itinerary. Cross-referencing GPS metadata from tag test footage, gas station receipts, and time-stamped voice memos left in the team's group drive, they confirmed the group had indeed reached the basin on April 8th. But something subtle emerged in those files: hesitation. In a voice memo dated the night before they departed, Jonas Strick, the crew's driver, recorded a private message never shared. "If this site's as remote as Erin says, we're gonna have no bars. I'm bringing the satellite phone. No one else knows how to use it, and I'm not messing around like last time in the quarry. If this trip goes sideways, I'm leaving." For real, the sat phone was never found. A week after the camera's discovery in 2025, detectives conducted renewed interviews with the victims' families. Luis Arbaleda's sister recalled a cryptic text he had sent the morning of April 8, 2022. "It's beautiful out here. Quiet, maybe too quiet. If we don't post by Sunday, call someone." But no one had followed up, not until April 14th, when the lodge called about their untouched gear. As part of the reopened investigation, authorities accessed archived ISP logs from April 2022. They confirmed one final data ping from Melissa Tan's phone at 4:38 p.m. on April 8th, nearly 10 miles southeast of where the camera had been found. The coordinates fell inside a dense, no-access stretch of the forest, known for frequent landslides. It was an area not included in any official search grid during the original investigation. The team returned to that location. What they found shifted the case dramatically. Buried beneath a section of collapsed trail, partially exposed by erosion, was a locked Pelican case. Inside, 3 backup drives, 1 water-damaged walkie-talkie, and a wrinkled production log. Its cover marked with Erin's initials. The logs inside had survived just enough to offer a crucial clue. One entry, dated April 8th, 3:14 p.m. Tried to set up the second GoPro. Too much static, not getting power. Luis swears he saw something off trail, about 30 yards past the creek. Melissa says it was nothing, but he's rattled. Jacob thinks we should scrap the cabin B-roll and get out before sunset. I told them we keep filming. This place is perfect. As analysts combed through the waterlogged drives, 2 usable video files were recovered. Both were metadata stamped within an hour of the final known phone ping. The footage showed nothing supernatural, just unsteady shots of the terrain, tall pines, shifting fog, and a low structure obscured by overgrowth. But there was audio, whispered arguments, then a single voice, Taylor's, speaking directly into the camera. "We're lost. Jonah's gone. He said he was going back to the van, but it's been 2 hours. Luis thinks we should head north, but the trail markers are gone. We've been circling, the GPS keeps resetting. I don't know where Erin is anymore." The file ends abruptly. The recovered production log also listed equipment inventories, one of which was marked missing even before filming began. Thermal scope never arrived from vendor. Oddly, the vendor confirmed it had been delivered, signed for by someone named Jonah S. on April 6th. But Jonah, according to his bank activity and call records, had been with the crew at a diner that morning, 100 miles away. The handwriting on the delivery form didn't match his. No one ever determined who accepted that package. Police released portions of the footage to the families under strict supervision. Melissa Tan's brother recognized the section of forest in the background. He believed it might correspond to a trail called Split Ridge, which had been decommissioned after a rock slide in 2001. Rangers confirmed that the site had long been unstable, but one of them recalled something else. Back in 2019, a maintenance worker clearing brush near Split Ridge had reported seeing campfire remnants, fresh but unclaimed. When authorities responded days later, they found nothing. The site had been noted but deprioritized. With this new lead, a forensic team returned with sonar equipment. Beneath layers of loose debris, they uncovered the remains of a fire pit, fragments of melted camera lenses, and a collapsed aluminum tripod. Further down the ridge, near the root system of a fallen cedar, they found another item, charred and warped by time, a production slate. It bore the name of the final shoot, Frightland S2E3, The Vanishing Path. But someone had crossed out the title with black marker and written a single word in uneven block letters. Real. Back in Portland, authorities reviewed voice samples. Anomalies in the recovered audio showed signs of vocal distortion, not consistent with faulty equipment. The static captured by the lost GoPro was not environmental. It was electromagnetic interference, irregular but patterned. Experts proposed it could have come from a malfunctioning shortwave transmitter or an improvised radio beacon. And then came the biggest shift. A DNA fragment, extracted from the interior fabric of the Pelican case, showed partial markers matching a known felon, not part of the film crew. This individual, Dorian Reese, had been convicted in 2016 for squatting and rigging illegal broadcast equipment in remote forested areas, attempting to hijack amateur radio waves with what he described as signal art. Reese was released in 2020. His last known residence was in northern Idaho. A current address could not be confirmed. The FBI was quietly contacted. Back in the Crescent Falls Basin, night vision drones began scanning for signs of disturbance, grave sites, shelters, disturbed earth. One flyover captured something odd, a circular patch of cleared vegetation roughly 12 feet wide, with charred concentric rings. The soil was still alkaline. It was dated to early 2022. At the center, the shattered base of a signal tower. The implication was immediate. Someone had been transmitting. What they were transmitting was unknown. By late July 2025, the Crescent Falls site was no longer just a search area. It was now an active crime scene, partially cordoned off under federal jurisdiction. What began as a recovery of abandoned film gear had escalated into something far more complex and deeply unsettling. The discovery of the Signal Tower Foundation altered everything. Dated by forensic soil analysis to early 2022, its charred base was surrounded by fragments of coaxial cable, scorched circuit boards, and broken glass fuses. A portable generator, melted almost beyond recognition, was found buried beneath half a foot of ash and pine needles. The setup was makeshift, but it bore technical sophistication, designed by someone who knew what they were doing. The FBI's behavioral unit was brought in to assess the possibility that the site had been used for illegal broadcast or worse, for psychological manipulation. The missing crew of Frightland may have stumbled upon more than a forgotten building in the woods. They may have uncovered a hidden operation. Meanwhile, the families grew increasingly frustrated. With no bodies recovered and no confirmed sightings, their hopes swung between desperate optimism and numbing dread. Media outlets began circling again. Several ran retrospectives on the case, replaying clips from Season 1 of Frightland, analyzing Erin's directorial style, Jacob's monologues, and Luis's distinctive camera work, all of which now took on a darker resonance. On July 23rd, a press leak changed the tone of coverage entirely. A journalist from the Oregonian obtained and published stills from the recovered DSLR footage. Among them, a blurry figure in the distant tree line, watching the crew. The image was ambiguous, possibly a crew member, or a shadow distorted by lens movement. But the internet exploded with speculation. Reddit threads dissected the photo pixel by pixel. YouTube channels posted breakdowns with ominous music zooming in on the face-like shape behind the foliage. None of it was substantiated, but public pressure forced authorities to release an official statement. They were investigating the possibility that the crew had encountered an unknown individual or group in the forest during production. Privately, investigators were divided. There was no sign of a violent altercation, no blood, no bodies, and yet every piece of equipment recovered had been deliberately hidden or destroyed. A second recovered GoPro card, discovered in a crushed waterproof pouch near the ravine, offered a haunting insight into the crew's final hours. The video began with Melissa filming herself, whispering, "We lost the ridge trail. I think Erin's gone back to the van. Luis says he heard something. I just want to go home. Why didn't we just leave?" In the background, a faint high-pitched sound can be heard, not speech, but a constant pulse. Audio specialists later confirmed it resembled an interrupted UHF signal. The file abruptly ends with Melissa turning the camera, her face startled. A flash of light floods the frame, then static. 2 days later, a private security contractor hired to assist with site perimeter control discovered a hidden cache nearly a mile beyond the original ranger cabin. Beneath a stone cairn were 3 items. A waterlogged field journal belonging to Jacob Vance, an empty prescription bottle issued to Jonah Strick, dated March 2022, a metallic object, a handheld radio scanner modified to operate on restricted frequencies. The journal contained erratic, increasingly paranoid entries. Jacob described confusion, missing time, strange dreams, and what he referred to as signal sickness. In his final legible entry, Erin thinks it's altitude. Melissa says we're being watched. I just want to finish this. Jonah is off. He hasn't said a word in hours. He stares at the trees like they're moving. That mention of Jonah triggered renewed interest in his background. A deep dive into financial and travel records revealed something previously overlooked. Jonah had taken a solo trip to Crescent Falls 2 months before production began. Credit card records showed a one-night stay at a campground near the same access road later used by the crew. When questioned back in 2022, his parents said Jonah had gone hiking to clear his head. But now, in the light of new evidence, that trip took on more weight. Investigators found that during his stay, Jonah had withdrawn $600 in cash, purchased copper wire, batteries, and a soldering kit from a hardware store in Corvallis, the same components found in the destroyed signal tower. This reopened a chilling possibility. Had Jonah been involved in constructing the tower? Did he return to the site under false pretenses, as part of the crew, already knowing what lay hidden in the forest? The ambiguity deepened when a former classmate from Jonah's trade school came forward, anonymously claiming Jonah had once spoken about controlling sound the way governments control space. The classmate described him as brilliant but obsessed, particularly with amateur signal jamming and clandestine broadcasting. The team returned to Jonah's apartment in Portland, now long since vacated. But storage records showed that his lease on a downtown storage unit had only recently lapsed. With a warrant, they entered. Inside, they found several radio schematics, pages torn from electromagnetic research journals. A full wall covered in taped Polaroids, many of which depicted trees, fog, and a single recurring symbol. Concentric circles with a jagged line through the center. And, most notably, a list of names. 6, written in blue ink: Erin, Luis, Taylor, Jacob, Melissa, and Jonah. Each name had a small box next to it. 5 were crossed out. Jonah's was not. On August 1st, federal agents classified the site at Crescent Falls as a restricted zone. Forensics resumed, this time searching for subterranean disturbance. A ground-penetrating radar scan revealed anomalies below the soil, inconsistencies suggesting artificial voids. What they unearthed was not what anyone expected: a buried container, airtight. Inside, an old military field recorder, the analog kind used in the late 1980s, wrapped in black cloth. It had one tape. On it, indistinct voices, a male and female, possibly Erin and Jacob, speaking softly. Male: "We've looped again. Same tree, same route split." Female: "It's been 6 hours. Luis is sick. Jonah hasn't come back." And then a different sound, a short, deliberate series of tones, like a digital code, followed by silence. Investigators are still trying to decipher it. Meanwhile, Jonah Strick remains missing. He was never formally declared dead. The container had been sealed expertly, not buried hastily, but placed with care. Its discovery marked the final known material evidence linked to the vanished Frightland crew. Investigators transferred the field recorder to a private forensic lab in Quantico, where technicians began the slow process of decoding the analog tape. The strange tone sequence at the end of the recording became the investigation's final obsession. Analysts cross-checked it against known distress signals, data pulses, and encryption systems used in broadcast media. Though the tones didn't match any standardized code, they bore acoustic similarities to interval signals once used by Cold War-era radio stations, brief sequences used to calibrate or identify frequency occupation. Someone had transmitted something from the basin, and someone had wanted it heard. While the forensic focus shifted to digital acoustics, field investigators pursued what remained of the Jonah Strick lead. Surveillance from a baited social media account set up to monitor old paranormal forums Jonah had frequented finally paid off. A new user had joined a dormant thread on signal disruption theory, using an IP linked to a municipal Wi-Fi node in northern Idaho. Agents tracked the signal to an abandoned ranger outpost near Priest Lake. There, inside a storage shed covered in moss and blackout tarp, they found signs of recent occupancy: a rusted cot, fire-stained aluminum cookware, a stack of water bottles, and taped pages from the Frightland shooting schedule. No human presence remained. But on the plywood wall above the cot, scratched into the wood, were 5 lines carved by hand, a reference familiar to anyone who had reviewed the recovered footage. Erin, Luis, Taylor, Jacob, Melissa. They saw too much. There was no signature, no DNA, but it was enough to confirm what some investigators had begun to suspect quietly. Jonah Strick had likely survived whatever happened in the Crescent Falls Basin, whether as a witness, a participant, or something more. And then came the final twist. In late August 2025, the FBI received a package with no return address. It had been postmarked from a small town near the Idaho border. Inside was a small microcassette labeled in Sharpie, "The Last Day." The handwriting was a match to Erin Weiler's, verified against her journal notes from Season 1. The audio began mid-sentence, "Wind, leaves," then Erin's voice. "If this is found, whoever finds this, don't come here. We went too far. There's something under the cabin. I think it was left behind by someone else, someone who lived here before. Not ghosts, not anything like that. Something built, signal-related, old tech, industrial. I don't know what Jonah touched, but it changed him. He's not Jonah anymore. He hasn't spoken in 2 days. He just writes in that stupid notebook, scratching circles and math formulas and weird symbols. Taylor says it's modulation data, like something you'd feed into a spectrum analyzer. I don't know. We've tried leaving twice. Every path loops. I don't think we're filming anymore. I don't know if we're alive anymore." A pause. Then, one last breath. "Mom, Dad, if this gets to you, I'm sorry. I should have picked a different story. I thought we were just making something scary, but the forest doesn't want to be filmed." The tape ended in static. In the weeks that followed, the case file was quietly reclassified. Public updates ceased. The FBI never confirmed the discovery of the field tape or the Priest Lake outpost. The families, frustrated, were given carefully worded briefings that foul play was suspected, that Jonah was a person of interest, and that the Crescent Falls site was considered unstable and permanently restricted. None of the bodies were ever recovered. No formal charges were filed. The 6 names remain on Oregon's missing persons registry, officially unresolved. The gear recovered was stored in evidence, along with over 200 GB of raw footage, degraded audio, and field logs. In late September 2025, the case's lead agent submitted a final note in the Federal Archive. "There are gaps we cannot close. We have signals but no source, evidence but no context. The human factor, stress, fear, isolation, could explain much. But not all. They were not the first to vanish in Crescent Falls, and they may not be the last." To this day, hikers still report disorientation near the Western Basin. Phones die unexpectedly. Trails veer subtly where maps say they shouldn't. And in rare moments of silence, some say you can still hear short pulses of static clicking faintly beneath the wind, as if something is still trying to transmit. And someone, somewhere, might still be listening.